Welcome back to English online classes. In the last two classes, we have discussed the first and the second part of the lesson, the best Christmas present in the world. Today, we are going to discuss the last part of the lesson. Before that, I will give you a brief about what we have learned earlier. So in the beginning, we have discussed that our narrator, Mr. Michael Morpurgo, had found a roll-top desk in a junk shop. He bought it from there and started repairing it on the Christmas Eve. He removed the roll-top completely and then started pulling out the drawers. And from among a secret drawer, he got a small black tin box. And inside the small black tin box, there was a letter. The letter was addressed to Mrs. Jim McPherson. The letter was about a wonderful thing that had happened on a Christmas day. Both the Fritz and Tommy were making peace in the middle of war. Jim McPherson was able to meet Mr. Hansol, the officer of German soldiers. Then they had a conversation regarding their occupation. Then they discussed about Dorset, his favorite writer Thomas Hardy, different characters in his books and all. So everything they discussed about the family also. After that, they shared the Christmas cake prepared by Connie. He liked the marzipan the most. Then there was a football match between Tommy and Fritz, and the Fritz won in that game. After that game, they went back to their trenches, and at night they exchanged carols. This was a wonderful thing that happened on that Christmas day. And as a conclusion, Mr. Jim McPherson told Connie that in the very next Christmas day, they will be able to meet.
Now, let's move on to the last part of the lesson, the best Christmas present in the world. I folded the letter again and slipped it carefully back into its envelope. I kept awake all night, but morning I knew what I had to do. I drove into Bridport, just a few miles away. So in the third part, I refers to narrator or Michael Morpurgo. So after reading the letter, he folded it again and slipped it carefully. Here slipped is the past tense of slip. Slip, slipped, slipped. So he slipped it, kept carefully back into the envelope. So he couldn't sleep that night. He kept awake all night. And the very next morning, he knew very well what he had to do. He started to Bridport. Drove is the past tense of drive. Drive, drove, driven. So he drove into Bridport, which was just a few miles away. I asked a boy walking his dog where Copper Beaches was. House number 12 turned out to be nothing but a burned out shell. The roof gaping, the windows boarded up. So on his way, he found a boy who was walking his dog. Here, walking his dog means assisting his dog. Okay, the boy was walking along with his dog. And the boy helped him to find out Copper Beaches. And what about the house number 12? It appeared to be nothing but just a burnt out shell. Burnt out means completely damaged because of fire. The roof gaping. Gaping means roof was not there. Okay. And the windows boarded up. Boarded up means just covered with woods. I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew the whereabouts of a Mrs. McPherson. Oh yes, said the old man in his slippers. He knew her well. A lovely old lady, he told me, a bit muddle-headed. But at her age, she was entitled to be, wasn't she? 101 years old. She had been in the house when it caught fire. So what did he do? He knocked the next door. And who came out from there? An old man in his slippers. He knew Mrs. Jim McPherson very well. He told that she was a lovely lady. A bit muddle-headed. What do you mean by muddle-headed? A little confused. Okay. And he says, but at her age, she was entitled to be. Entitled means she has the right to have a little bit muddle-headedness. Okay, so that is entitled here. So she was 101 years old and she had been in the house when it caught fire. No one really knew how the fire had started, but it could well have been candles. She used candles rather than electricity because she always thought electricity was too expensive. So nobody knows how the fire has started. They say that it might have been because of candles. She used candles rather than electricity because she thought that it was expensive, that electricity was expensive. The fireman had got her out just in time. She was in a nursing home now, he told me, Burlington House on the Dorchester Road on the other side of the town. So the fireman had rescued her just in time. Had got her out here means rescued her just in time. What happened? The house was totally damaged and now she stays in a nursing home. What was the name of the nursing home? Burlington House. Where was it? On the Dorchester Road on the other side of the town.
After reading the letter, he folded it and kept into the envelope. He was not able to sleep that night. The very next day, he went to Bridgeport. There, he found a boy and asked him where Copper Beaches was. The house number 12 seemed to be a burned out shell, totally damaged by fire. He asked the old man in the neighboring house about Mrs. Jim McPherson. He told that Mrs. Jim McPherson was a lovely lady of 101 years of age, but a little bit muddle-headed. Nobody knows what actually happened. She was inside the house when it caught fire. Some people say that it was because of candles. She used candles rather than electricity because she thought electricity was expensive.
I found Burlington House nursing home easily enough. There were paper chains up in the hallway and a lighted Christmas tree stood in the corner with a lopsided angel on top. I said I was a friend come to visit Mrs. McPherson to bring her a Christmas present. So it was easy for the narrator to find out Burlington House nursing home, which was on the Dorchester Road on the other side of the town. So he reached there and he could see that in the hallway it was decorated with paper chains and a lighted Christmas tree was also there in the corner with a lopsided angel. Here lopsided means one side lower than the other. Okay. He said that he was a friend who came to visit Mrs. McPherson to bring her or to give her a Christmas present. I could see through into the dining room where everyone was wearing a paper hat and singing. The matron had a hat on too and seemed happy enough to see me. She even offered me a mince pie. She walked me along the corridor. So narrator could see through the dining room that everyone was wearing a paper hat and they were singing. That shows that they were celebrating Christmas. The matron was also wearing a hat and she was very happy to see our narrator. She even offered him a mince pie. Look at the phrasal verb used here. Walked me along. Walked someone along. The meaning is to help someone learn or be familiar with something. Here the meaning is that she took him to the corridor or she assisted him along the corridor. Understood? Now see the continuation. Mrs. McPherson is not in with the others. She told me. She is rather confused today, so we thought it best if she had a good rest. She has no family, you know, no one visits. So I am sure she will be only too pleased to see you. The matron told our narrator that Mrs. McPherson was not with others. The problem is that she was rather confused those days and so they thought that it will be better for her to take rest. Nobody visits her and she has no family also, and she said that Mrs. Jim McPherson will be happy if she sees our narrator. See, she took me into a conservatory with wicker chairs and potted plants all around and left me. So the matron had taken him into a conservatory. Here conservatory means a room with glass walls. Okay, with wicker chairs, twigs, chairs made of twigs and all, and potted plants were also there around that place, and matron left.
It was easy for him to find out Burlington Nursing Home. It was Christmas Day and everyone was celebrating it. Even on the way to the Burlington house, the walls were decorated with paper chains and a lighted Christmas tree was also there. When he reached there, he found that the people were wearing paper hats and they were singing. The matron was also having a paper hat and she was happy to see the narrator. He introduced himself as a friend of Mrs. Jim McPherson who came to give her a Christmas present. She was happy. She even offered a mince pie. Then she took him to at the place where Mrs. Jim McPherson was there. She told that Mrs. Jim McPherson was those days a little bit muddle-headed and so she was not with others.
Now read the continuation. The old lady was sitting in a wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap. She had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun. She was gazing out at the garden. The old lady, Mrs. Jim McPherson, was sitting in a wheelchair and she had her hands folded in her lap and all. And when our narrator had seen her, she had silver white hair. Okay, it was pinned into a wispy bun. Wispy means fine feathery bun and all. Okay, and what was she doing? She was gazing out at the garden. Hello, I said. She turned and looked up at me vacantly. Happy Christmas, Connie, I went on. I found this. I think it's yours. As I was speaking, her eyes never left my face. I opened the tin box and gave it to her. So our narrator said Happy Christmas to Connie and told that he got it. And what was that in his hands and all? It was that tin box. So he gave that tin box to her. That time and all, this lady was continuously looking at his face. That was the moment her eyes lit up with recognition and her face became suffused with a sudden glow of happiness. I explained about the desk, about how I had found it, but I don't think she was listening. So when she found that box with the letter, what happened? Her face became suffused with a glow, a sudden glow. Here suffused means spread with, a feeling that came on her face. Okay, a feeling of happiness came over her face. He explained everything. He explained about the desk, from where he got it, everything, understood, and from where he got the letter, everything he explained, but she was not listening to anything. For a while she said nothing, but stroked the letter tenderly with her fingertips. Suddenly she reached out and took my hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. You told me you would come home by Christmas, dearest, she said. And here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. Come closer. So, while he was explaining those things, she didn't say anything. She just stroked the letter. Stroke means move gently, touch gently. So, she just touched that letter gently with her fingertips. Suddenly what she did, she reached out and took his hand. Her eyes were filled with tears at that time. And she said, he had told her that he would come by Christmas. And here you are. That means you are now present before me, the best Christmas present in the world. Here what happens is that Mrs. Jim McPherson was a little bit muddle-headed, isn't it? So when the narrator came to meet her, she thought that with the letter, she thought that he is her husband, Mr. Jim McPherson. Understood? And that's why she is telling all these things. You told that you will come by Christmas and here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. And she asked him to sit near her. Now read the climax of the story. I sat down beside her and she kissed my cheek. I read your letter so often, Jim, every day. I wanted to hear your voice in my head. It always made me feel you were with me. And now you are. Now you are back. You can read it to me yourself. Would you do that for me, Jim dear? I just want to hear your voice again. I love that so much. And then perhaps we'll have some tea. I have made you a nice Christmas cake, marzipan all around. I know how much you love marzipan. So what happened here? The narrator sat beside her and she kissed him and then told all these things. She told that she read the letter every day, isn't it? And that made her feel that he was always with her. And now she says that here you are, isn't it? Now you are in front of me. Now you can read the letter for me once again. And then she told that she loved it very much and she wanted to have tea with him, and she told that she had prepared a Christmas cake. No, actually she didn't prepare anything. These all things are because of her confused mind. She said that she had prepared a Christmas cake with marzipan all around, since he loved marzipan the most. Okay.
Mrs. Jim McPherson was sitting in a wheelchair looking out at the garden. Our narrator introduced himself and then showed that black tin box, and he opened it and saw the letter. She was not having any expression on her face. She was just looking at him. Then he told how he got that tin box and he explained about the test, everything. But she was not listening to anything. She just touched that letter gently for some time. Then after that, tears came out from her eyes. She asked our narrator to sit near her. Already it was told that she was having a little bit muddle-headedness, and that's why now she is confused. She is thinking our narrator as Mr. Jim McPherson. She thought that her husband had come with a letter. That's why she asked him to sit near her. When he sat near her, she kissed him and then asked him why was he late. She also told that she read the letter every day and she wanted him to read that letter at that time. She also told that for the Christmas time she has prepared a cake for him since he loved the marzipan. My dear children, which is the best Christmas present in the world? Yes, it is our narrator who was misunderstood as Mr. Jim McPherson by Mrs. Connie is the best Christmas present. We can also tell that the letter that she got is also the best Christmas present in the world. So that's the end of the lesson. Please read the lesson several times and try to write the answers for the comprehension check. Thank you.